this way is row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is helpful if you ever look at those chess books that have moves. That's when you'll need to know, like C2, C3, C4, D4. That's what they're talking about. They've made a grid. Well, I was trying to be more quiet in this video. Whatever. So the basics of where the pieces, how they can move. A pawn can only move in a straight line going forward. And for the most part, he can move one space at a time. The only time that's different is on the very first move. A pawn can jump up 2 spaces. But then after that, he can only move one space at a time. If a pawn manages to move up all the spaces, all the way to the other players, I don't know what you call this. Anyway, area, his first line here. If he manages to get there, he will be promoted. And what that means is this player can decide what piece he wants this pawn to now be. Generally, that's going to be a queen, but he could make it any piece he wants, except a king. So if a pawn makes it all the way to the other side, he could become a queen. The reason why a pawn can jump 2 spaces is because originally pawns could only go 1 space. But over time, they realized it was making the game take a little too long. So they said, on your first move, the pawn can jump up 2 spaces. The problem with that is that sometimes this player would have a pawn all the way up here. And so, I just realized there's one thing I didn't explain. Hold on. Pawns can only go forward, but if there's a player in front of him, he can't go to that space. He's just stuck. He can't move anywhere now. He's stuck unless a piece from the other player's side gets diagonal from him in a forward position. Then he can take that piece and capture it. And it doesn't matter. It could be a queen. He's allowed to take that piece and capture it. But that only works if it's in a forward diagonal position. If the piece were here, he can't go backwards to capture. Only forward diagonal in either direction. Okay, having said that, if this player has a piece on this side, on the opposing side of the board, and this pawn decides to jump 2 spaces, there is a rule called in passant. I think it's French for in passing. And if he does this and jumps ahead, this pawn can go here and take him. And the reason for that has to do with the historical, that it used to be they could only go 1 spot and he would have been able to take him. But they changed the rule to allow him to go 2. So if he wants, he can take him. But he might not want to because there might be other important things going on. You know, you don't necessarily do that. Alright, I think that's a good explanation of pawns. And pawns are always lined up on the second row. And they're the piece that you have the most of are pawns. The most outer row is this piece, which is called a rook, which is like a castle. And a rook can move in a straight line. It can go straight this way. It can go straight this way. It can go as many spaces as are available and open during that play. It doesn't have to just go one space. It can go forward, it can go backward, as long as it's going in a straight line. This is a knight. It looks like a horse. You have two knights on either side right next to the rook. They can move in an L shape. The L is basically, well, it is 1, 2, and then either left or right 1. So 1, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 1. And it can do that in any direction. 1, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 1. The special skill that a knight has is like a horse. It can jump over things. So if it's in this row and these pawns are blocking it, none of these other characters can get out because the pawns are in the way. So you'd have to move the pawn out of the way before it can get out of its space. But a knight can jump over it and go 1, 2, 1 and be there. It can jump the pawn. Now if a pawn were here, the knight can't go 1, 2. It can't land there because it's already taken space by its own character, by its own piece. So it can go 1, 2, 1 to here. That's really 1, 2, 1. It can't go there. But like if this were open, it could jump both these 1, 2, 1. Now, if this space happened to be taken by a pawn of another of the other player, then it could go 1, 2, and capture it. Not just a pawn. I mean, shoot. Sorry. Even if it doesn't matter if it's any piece. It can go 1, 2, and capture it if it's of the other teams. Okay, so that's the knight. This piece you have 2 of, and it's called a bishop. And each bishop is on a different color, so there's one on light and there's one on dark. And they move diagonally, but only on the color that they start off on. So this bishop can move as many spaces as he wants, but only on dark. So in one move he could move all the way out to here, and then the following move he could move this direction. As long as he stays on dark, he can move around, but he can't like turn mid-move. I mean, he's got to go and then wait for his next move, and this one, same thing, but always on the light color. The next important character is your queen. And the queen is really the most valuable. Your king's most valuable because he wins or loses the game, basically. But your whole goal is to protect your king, and he doesn't have a whole lot of skill. But the queen, she's really cool because she can go straight in either direction and diagonally on any. If she's on a light color, she can go there. If she's on a dark color, she can go diagonally and dark. She can go straight. So she's pretty awesome. The king can go one space in any direction. He's kind of like a big pawn, except that a pawn can only go forward. The king can go in any direction one space. The only other special move the king has is a move called castling. And this move can only be done if the castle, the rook, and the king have not had any movement yet in the game. They have to be in their original spots without having moved. And then what can happen is the king moves either to this direction or to this direction, and the rook on the side of the movement goes to the other side of the king. So if he's castling with this guy, and there can't be anybody in between them, it's got to be clear. So if he goes 1, 2, and then this rook will move over here. That's the only time the king really can move more than one spot. 1, 2, and the rook moves over here. So on this side he's out 2 from the edge. On this side he's out 1 from the edge. Now if... Sorry guys, there might be some noise in this video. If the king is in check, like right now this queen, on the next move she could come in here and capture the king. So that's called check. If the king is in check, he is not allowed to use castling as a way to get out of check. So he cannot castle right now, he'll have to just move. And once he moves, he can't castle anymore. And similarly, that's not a good example. Hold on. Shoot, sorry guys. So if, like while there's check in the line of, in this line, he cannot castle. So it might seem like, oh, it would be a great idea to castle right now, because that will put the rook ready to take the queen. But he can't, because he can't pass through the line of check. Because that would be, like, you have to picture it like, you know, if he does that, she could come down and get him, so he can't pass through the line of check. I think those are all the rules of castling. He can't be in check, he can't pass through check, and neither the rook nor the king can have moved before that. And I told you guys about promotion. Well, we didn't really talk about just the basic setup of the board. So let's do that. So the first thing you have is on the second row, you have a whole line of pawns. So they're like your first line of protection. You have a whole row of pawns. And then you have your rooks on the outer edges. And then the knights. And then the bishops. And then you have your king and your queen. And the king is usually slightly larger than the queen, although sometimes, you know, in some pieces they can look pretty similar. But the king's bigger. And the queen always goes on her own color. So the queen will go on the light color and the king will go on the dark color. And that's true on both sides. So let me get a little piece of paper here, hold on. So you have your king, and you have your queen, and rook, and bishop, and knight, and you have a pawn. Now, these all have values, and when you play just at home, you usually either play, win, lose, or draw, but you could add the value. So a pawn is worth 1 point, a knight and a bishop are worth 3 points, the rook is worth 5 points, and the queen is worth 9 points, and obviously the king is, you know, if you capture the king, the game's over. But when this could come in handy is, well, one, just for understanding which pieces you might want to protect the most, because sometimes in play you have to kind of sacrifice a piece in order to save another piece. And it's hard sometimes to know which piece you're willing to sacrifice. But I'll always sacrifice a pawn and a knight before any of the others. Because for me, the rook, well, I would put them in this order from least to most important to me. The pawn, the knight, the bishop, obviously, you gotta protect him to win the game. But, yeah, I like to play with my rooks and my queen. That's usually my strategy. Although bishop, queen, rook, these three can be a pretty powerful team to work with for strategy. Anyway, so that's just kind of, I was going to say some games end where you're not in checkmate, but you're kind of just where you're moving back and forth, check, out of check, out of check, and there are not enough pieces left to create a checkmate situation. So that is called a stalemate, and so it can be considered a tie. Although I know, like, when we used to play, I never knew about these points, but we had an idea of which pieces were better and not better. And so my brother and I'd be like, well, I captured this and I captured it, so technically I won. So, it just depends on how you want to do it. But what you could do is count up your pieces and count up your points if you have a stalemate. But the end goal is to get somebody into checkmate where, no matter what move they make, their king is in check and there's nothing they can do about it. So they can't go anywhere without being in check. That's checkmate. I actually did an example earlier that turned out pretty good. Sorry, I kind of have my phone precariously perched. And I bump it and make myself nervous. Earlier I was showing about, because I recorded this with a soft-spoken, but it turned out not as soft-spoken as I think it was like this. I was showing how you can promote your pawn. So if this guy were to go to here and say, make me a queen, the minute he's a queen, he can look at this king and say, checkmate. Because even though they still have a queen and a bishop and a knight and a rook, there's nothing they can do to protect their king. And right now, this is a queen, so the king is in check. So he either has to move out of check, or he has to have somebody come along and save him. Well, nobody's around to save him. So if he goes here, he's still in check. If he goes here, because of this pawn, which can take him this way, he's still in check. So he would be in checkmate. Now, if he were lucky and he had this bishop out here, this person could say, I'm now a queen, check. And then this bishop could fly in here and take him out of check by blocking it. But the problem is the very next move, this is a queen now, he'd just take that bishop and then say, okay, now checkmate. So this guy's in a world of hurt. But anyway, that's what checkmate is. There's just nowhere else for him to go. There's nowhere else for him to go, and there's no one to save him. It turns out it's hard to make this really quiet. Okay, I can't think of anything else that I haven't told you. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything. So, anyway, I hope that helped you at the very, very basics. Obviously, there's tons of terminology. There's tons of strategies. There's so much more to chess. I mean, people study chess for years and years, but that's just the basic of how the pieces move. And once you know how the pieces move, if you play with somebody who's also an amateur, you can just start playing and kind of learn. And if you just look up like opening moves, like what are the best 3 opening moves, that can help, to just get started. Or just play. I mean, it's fun. But used to play as a kid with my brother. He would sit and think about his next 25 moves for 30 minutes. I'd run off and bake a mini batch of chocolate chip cookies and come back, and he'd still be thinking about it. So after a while, we put a timer